Look, it's time to rock, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the channel. My name is Andrew, and it's my proud pleasure, folks, to have back on our channel Bob. How are you, brother?
Hi. Hello, everybody, and hi. It's great to be back, Andrew. I'm delighted. I'm actually flattered and thrilled to be asked back, and I can't help but, while your theme music was running, whether I'm a listener to the show or whether I'm now on it, it's just a great piece of rocking out music to get started.
Fantastic. Thank you for coming back. I know that when we did the first show, we had planned, obviously, to do a second show and maybe a third show, because one thing, folks, if you aren't aware of this, an hour and a half when you're live goes just like this. And so everything that you have planned and scheduled to talk about, you probably get not even halfway through it, Bob.
Well, it doesn't help that you just touch my nose and I just talk shit for hours anyway. So, that as well.
If anybody's watching on a replay and wants to know why my voice is croaky, I'm fine. I've just got a sore voice. I did a lot of yelling and screaming last night. My dog Pepper got attacked, and I wasn't used to that. So obviously there was a lot of yelling and screaming going on. But Pepper's fine, and
Good.
I'm fine, and Bob is fine.
Just when we were talking before we came on air, I was explaining I'm a new dog owner. I've got a dog of about 7 or 8 months old. First time in my long life I've ever had any kind of pet at all. So very steep learning curve for the dog, the poor dog, and also for me. So I've obviously got a really serious vested interest in Andrew's predicament. But the dog's okay.
Yeah. She's okay. She was just nipped a bit, not used to it. I'm going to give you some advice, Bob. Your family life will never be the same. Whether you're young, mature, having a dog in your house is fantastic. That your household, and you're probably already experiencing it now. It's just, fantastic.
Well, for me at the moment, I'll be frank with you, it's a little bit mixed, because I'm a terrible control freak. I like complete bloody perfection in everything. And of course, the thing about a dog is that it brings a good degree of randomness into your life.
Oh, of course.
Now, I reckon so. The energy that came from this is firstly led by my wife, pretty ably supported by our son. I'm very much the junior kind of passive partner in this exercise. But I did realize, rather than trying to fight it, I did realize that actually this is what they wanted to do, so we better get on and do it. My wife's found a really lovely little dog. He's a nice bloke. He's very pretty. And actually, by dog standards, given he's young, he's a puppy, he's pretty well behaved. But he's still a major assault on my idea of perfection. And so everything at the moment is framed in that. And really, it's all about me getting used to it.
Yeah.
But, he's got a nice life here. We've got enough space, for him to roam around in our garden. The house is big enough. He's well fed and watered. So, no problems at all. And he gets plenty of love from, he's got 3 people looking after him. So there's always some entertainment. So it's great. But I'm getting used to it.
Well, one final thing on that. It'll be good for you then, Bob. This dog experience. It'll be good for you. You'll be a better man for it. Trust me.
Absolutely. So it's great. So anyway, I'm glad that your pooch is. But I mean, she's going to be traumatized. She's going to be very kind of sheepish and head down for a while, I guess.
Yeah. I took her for a walk today at the dog. But not our normal route.
Okay.
But yeah.
Hey, so let's move to blues.
Yes, rock and roll.
Yeah.
We don't have anyone watching. We've got 2 people watching. That could just be you and I. But we're going to run the show. If you guys aren't aware, the last show that we did with Bob, we had, I just checked it when Bob and I were getting ready for the show live, folks, 1,200 views. So we really appreciate the fact that 1,200 people thought that what Bob and I had to say was interesting.
Absolutely.
The first time.
Well, Andrew, on that note, let me tell you, I mean, we're probably going to run back and talk about this a bit more, but I did a guitar show in England recently where I took my nice guitars and exhibited them. And this was a guitar show about 200 miles north of London between Manchester and Liverpool. Davey Woodford's on board. Hello, Davey. Hiya. Anyway, we had a table right at the back of the show. What they do is the show organizers give us the space at a steep discount. And then we take some lovely guitars up there. And basically, we act as a draw to pull people through to the back end of the show. So all the paying exhibitors get plenty of traffic and footfall.
Good.
And it's a really, everybody's back gets scratched. It's great. But the number of people who were coming up to me and talking about my and Ramon's video channel, and we do numbers that are probably, I don't know, we might do 500, we might do 1,000. Sometimes we might get lucky and do several thousand, but they're very small numbers. But in this small space, everybody was coming up to me and talking about it. So you suddenly got a little tiny little taste of what celebrity is like. Imagine if that happened when you walk down the high street. Oh,
yeah. Good point. Because that community that you're involved in is focused and concentrated. So it must have been, you must have felt chuffed.
It was really good. And the other thing is, I think I may have shared this with you last time we spoke. I won't dwell on it, but when before we did it a few years back, I was very nervous about doing this kind of thing. I'm an old dog learning new tricks. I'm not a social media, guru or anything like that. And I'd seen my fair share of, trolling and general unpleasantness, particularly on Twitter. So I was a little bit leery about doing it. I was absolutely bowled over by the level of positivity and good will and good humor. We've only ever had, we've had less than that many adverse comments in our entire time doing it. And we've only had one, which was admittedly completely vile. But we've only had one comment that really, as I read it on screen, I kind of felt myself chill. Everything else, hundreds, thousands of comments, have been incredibly supportive, unbelievably so. So in other words, for all the fact that you can go to certain places on the internet, you can find all this, torrent of rabid filth and stuff. There's an awful lot of goodwill and good stuff out there as well. And what you and I are doing here is part of that. It's reason to be cheerful.
It's a good point, and it's something that our channel's always made a point of saying, Bob. As music fans and musicians, we have a responsibility to social media from this background to make it a positive place. Now, I don't mean it like, positive as in like everything is positive. Yes, if something's wrong or whatever, and you want to correct somebody about a fact or whatever, there's a way to do it. But YouTube's not what it was when it first came out. It was the Wild West, Bob. Now people seem to be a little bit more supportive. And we've had some people correct a few things that we've said on our channel, but we've never gone out, Bob, and said we're experts. We're just fans. I always say that every show. I'm just a fan, and so are you, Bob.
Absolutely. Well, and actually, you're so right, because, for example, at this very show I'm talking about, there were 3 or 4 other guys on the same stand showing some of their guitars. Okay. We had 5 58, 59, 60 Sunburst Les Pauls, which is as many as anyone has ever seen in one place here, because this isn't America. We don't have shows, where you get a whole room full of the damn things. That one of the dealers in the UK who's currently got 2, he was going to have his 2 as well, but he didn't bring them. So we were going to have 7, which would have been a UK record. But next time we exhibit, probably in the autumn, back down near London, I think we'll probably break the record. And in UK, Germany, Japan, US are the markets where these things really hang out. But there are hundreds of the damn things in the US. Let's assume they're all real for the moment.
Sure.
There's hundreds in the US. There are, I don't know how many there are here. Couple of dozen.
Wow.
Maybe. I don't know. I mean, I know. No, there's probably more than a couple. Maybe 30. But to get more in one place. And by the way, I actually jumping around already. But while we're on guitar shows, I should say, I and a bunch of collector friends have got a plan. It's very early days because the space in which we're going to do this hasn't yet been completed. But one of these collector friends is developing a space down in a little way southwest of London, quite easily accessible, about an hour on the train.
Yeah.
And this space, it'll be a multi-purpose space. And one of the things we're going to use this space for is we're actually going to have our own guitar show. It's not going to be a commercial show. And basically, it's going to be built around the nucleus. Is going to be me, my four collecting cronies.
Yeah.
And then the collectors that I've met through exhibiting at these other proper commercial shows.
Okay.
And maybe a couple more people with some nice stuff that I've heard about who I'll invite. So the nucleus will be all our collections put together, which will be the best show of guitars that has ever been seen in the UK. No question at all. Mine alone, very nice. Mine plus, and one other guy, really getting interesting, but one guy, his stuff alone, most people have never seen this stuff before. It will be insane. Our biggest logistical problem is how to get all his shit to this place.
Wow.
Right.
Wow.
Unfortunately, my wife is a florist and she has a van, so I have some transport. But I can get my nice guitars in a big car. He can't get his in one van. Right. Amazing stuff. Really rare things. One-off things from the 1940s and 50s. Incredible stuff. And then what we're planning to do, if you imagine looking at this like a target, so if we're the bullseye, then there'll be a ring around it, which is really people that any of us know well that we would like to invite. So these could be dealers, they could be other collectors, they could be pickup makers, luthiers, amplifier makers, but very much on our invitation, right?
Wow.
And then the outer layer, which is what most people would call the public.
Sure.
I don't think there's going to be a public because I don't think we're going to have the space for a public.
Okay.
I mean, let's say we want to get 200 people there in total. We can do that by invitation. So, and also there's going to be an issue of how we get people there. If people want to drive, there's a parking issue as well. And we have had some issues in this location before where we've had an event that's so successful that people turn up and park all the way up the roads and basically cause a traffic jam and the police get upset. So
yeah,
we've done an event around cars before and it was so successful the police got really pissed off. So we're going to have to control it. But I think in due course, this is probably going to be, it's not going to happen in 6 months. It's going to be a little longer than that. But when it begins to happen, I'll let you guys know because, I'm pretty sure that we'll get somebody in there with a camera to kind of walk the room. So we'll get some video, and all that shit. And maybe there's something we can do because I'm pretty certain I've never seen anything like this in the UK. Now I've only been in this space for 25 years, but
okay.
I
there's a couple of things, Bob, that you have to do. Obviously, you have to film the event. Whether or not you go live with that footage is one thing, but we will certainly put our hand up as a channel to stream anything.
Fantastic.
If you want to give us that opportunity, we'd love to. But you certainly need to film it because if this is going to be a concentrated, once-in-a-lifetime show, you have to have a documented record of because there's going to be people around the world who are going to be going, wow, they aren't going to get an opportunity, Bob, to obviously participate, and even people locally who can't participate.
Yeah.
Plus, Bob, will help promote your show. So,
fantastic. I mean, to give you a taste, we'll have an Explorer. Well, that's one of 23. That's it. We'll have 3 or 4 bursts. We'll have more 1959 335s than you can throw a stone at. We'll have some really interesting, there's a Gretsch, a prototype country gentleman. There's only 2 in the world. One is documented, one isn't. We'll have the undocumented one.
Wow.
there's a guitar from the 50s called a Gibson L5T, which is also called the George Goebel model. George Goebel was a comic entertainer who accompanied himself with guitar.
Okay.
And the story in entertainment is, if you go to the circus, the very, very best gymnasts are the clowns.
Yes.
Because to mess about, you've got to be even better than if you're doing it for serious. That's the way the story goes. It may be apocryphal, but in the same way, some comedy entertainers have been some of the most brilliant musicians. I think one of the Marx Brothers was an exceptional musician, but he just messed around. And we had a guy in the UK called Les Dawson, a comedian, who used to play an out-of-tune piano. And he was an exceptional piano player.
Yeah, we used to have Les Dawson on the tally here.
There you go. So anyway, so this George Goebel guy, but basically the guitar was made by Gibson, but it got nicknamed the George Goebel model, and there are 23 of them. So it's an L5 big body archtop, but it's T, so it's thin. Wow. And there are 23 of them. 22 are red. We'll have the sunburst one.
Wow.
So we will have exceptional. I mean, apart from lovely things. We'll have some amazing TV Junior Les Pauls. We'll have lots of shit. I haven't actually counted, but I think if we want to, I think we can put about 300 amazing instruments together.
Are you going to have amps and vintage pedals or anything like that as well, Bob?
So at the moment, my mental horizon is guitars. Okay. But that's exactly the right question, because frankly, you've got to, haven't you? You've just got to. Now, strangely, some of us, we've got a few bits and pieces. I have hardly any vintage amps at all. My only vintage amp is my little 58 Fender Tweed. 4 watts, 1 volume control, nothing. And most of my friends have got one of those, so we can have a few Tweeds. But one of the guys has got some interesting old Marshalls. And a couple of old AC30s and stuff like that. But the amps that we have in our collection are nothing like the guitars. So if we did amps, but there is a guy, for example, there's a guy, he's got a memorable surname. His surname is Goodhand Tate. And his father or his uncle was in a band called Nirvana, but not the one you and I know, but the one that was on Island Records in 1969.
Wow.
Right? And anyway, an older relative of his was in Nirvana and turned into an amp collector. And this guy is he's the generation that's carried on the mantle. So he's a very serious amp dealer, collector, and fixer in the UK. We could easily, I'm in touch with him, so we could easily just say, hey, mate, would you be the amp guy, please?
Okay.
And, we're setting this up. The idea is not that there is going to be commercial trade going on at this event. Just simply, I mean, for me, I'll do it like I do any other event here. I just exhibit them for the pleasure of exhibiting them.
Yep.
I'm not selling anything, but I love chatting about them to people and talking. And also, when people come up to the stand and they sort of ogle something, I'll stand behind the table and I'll say, would you like to pick it up? And they go, what? I said, well, I'm the owner. While I'm here and you're here, it looks safe to me. So why don't you pick it up and feel it? And have a little play.
You let people touch your 58.
Yeah.
Good on you.
Why not? I mean, really, unless you've got a complete crazy bloody idiot, you don't get any terrorists at guitar shows. So there's going to be none of that. So what's the worst thing? The guy could drop it. That's the worst thing.
Well,
and of course, he's not going to drop it because he's going to pick it up like a piece of bone china.
Of course.
So, and it is amazing how much goodwill you get out of just, saying to people, well, I'm here. It's quite safe. Pick it up, touch it, have a feel. And people's eyes light up because nobody else. Collectors are very, it's mine. It's mine. It's like Spinal Tap, but serious. And to just say to somebody, look, especially some of my young player friends, some of whom are really fucking brilliant, come round, have a play, spend 2 hours, get used to it. I'll leave you in the room and you can make a lot of noise if you want. Just, get used to it. Get a feeling of what all the fuss is about or not.
Okay.
And, you know,
Okay.
I've had guys here who've said, you know, you've got some fantastic guitars, but I'm not sure that they're worth 10 or 100 times the guitars that I can access. And I go, no, good. I'm really glad to hear that, because this isn't about worship.
Yeah.
Thank you, Simon Williams, on screen, by the way. Philip, good hand tape. That's the one. You know, it's not about worship, but most guys who come and play my guitars go, Christ, I see what all the fuss is about. Yeah.
Yeah.
But some don't. And in many ways, I find that more refreshing, because so many people worship what the guitar stands for rather than is it any good.
Look, I can understand that, though. To be fair, you know, to be in a room with a 58 or a 59, for a lot of us, Bob, is the epitome of the best guitar safari trip ever.
Yeah.
Let alone touching it. You know,
Yeah.
I know guys through social media who've gone to that Metropolitan Museum exhibition, and they've stood next to Jimmy Page's Les Paul through the glass.
Yeah.
And they've felt they've been in, like, you know, the resurrection room.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think when we talked before, I also said that when I collect guitars, I buy guitars that are. I buy guitars, obviously, if I want, you know, I don't know, a 335 or a Strat or whatever. I know what I'm looking for, but I buy guitars that are just regular guitars. I don't buy celebrity guitars, because it brings fans into the market, and what it does is increases the number of buyers, doesn't increase the number of sellers, so it jacks the price up. And also, some fans, I think I told the story last time, but we found this. A friend of ours is a mad Springsteen fan. He's traveled all over the world. He's seen him dozens of times. He's also very wealthy, and he wanted a guitar like Bruce Springsteen's. It's not possible to have a guitar like Bruce Springsteen's because it's a mongrel, but it's based on a 52-ish Esquire Tele chassis. So we found him one. Cost a lot of money. He can't play. He can't play cowboy chords, right? So in the celebrity area, the fans come in, and some of these fans have got a great deal of money, and so they just push the prices up. So that's a separate market for guitars. So, for example, Greenie, yes, it was played by Peter Green, and it to produce some of the most incredible guitar playing we'll ever witness.
Yeah.
Then it was owned by Gary Moore, and he did a pretty fantastic job too.
Yeah.
Now, I'm going to sound a bit old now, but now Kirk Hammett puts it through too many drive pedals. But hey, you've got 3 world-famous guitarists owning that guitar. Imagine the fans are going to be crawling all over it. No wonder it you know, it's $1 million or $2 million guitar because of Peter Green.
Don't forget, Bob. Don't forget, Bob, too, that Kurt Hammett's milked that Greenie with 4 iterations of it through Gibson as well.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, and actually, you know, let's be commercial for a minute. You know, if he had spunked out, you know, there's a dispute about how much he paid, but it's definitely a 7-figure sum.
Yeah, he's saying not $2 million.
You're gonna need to defray that a little bit, however you can. You know, I would. Why not? I don't blame him, and I think the good news is that at least he's keeping it very much in the public profile. It's not disappeared and hidden like so many of the things. It's not underground.
Yeah,
and I think that's a good thing. By the way, he's also, you probably know, he also he bought another guitar recently through Carter Vintage in Nashville. The only documented authentic black 58 Les Paul.
Yeah.
Which I'm friendly with the guys at the North American Guitar who acquired Carter Vintage, because they're a bunch of Brits. And I was delighted to hear that they'd been involved in that transaction, because that really puts them in the big time.
Wow.
And you know, I've seen some private pictures of that black one. It's a strange thing, because I've got this funny thing about original black guitars. I would never buy one because I wouldn't trust myself to be able to tell whether it was real or not.
Okay.
Black's a really easy color to fake. It's a solid color. You haven't got the signature of a wood grain underneath. You know, a lot of the way people identify Les Pauls, was this the Eric Clapton Beano? They look at photos and they can see bits of wood grain in the photos, and they compare it, and they go, nah, the wood grain's all different. You can't do that with a solid black guitar.
No.
And, there are plenty of guys in the world, these days who could take a fantastic instrument and refinish it in black utterly convincingly. I wouldn't trust myself.
What's that guitar worth, Bob? You got any
Well,
idea?
I in conversations like this, I'm usually quite credulous. I overvalue things, but
Okay.
I can't see how it's worth less than 7 figures.
Wow.
Because you think about it, really, really interesting good Les Pauls now. I used to say 250,000 UK. Now it seems to be nearer 300,000 UK, but that's for an ordinary one. If it's got a lot of flaming shit going on, the Yanks are now paying 450, nearly $500,000.
Bob.
So, and
Bob.
there are several of those in circulation. There's one of these known. It's like the left-handed ones, and I think Davey put a message on the screen a little earlier about bloody Macca. But imagine how much Paul McCartney, his left-handed Sunburst, one of used to be 4, now there's 5 known. Imagine how much that's worth.
Yeah.
I don't know, 10 million. I don't know.
What's really interesting about vintage guitars and non-vintage guitars, I don't know whether you heard this or read it, but one of the 50K greenies that came out, 50, is being sold on eBay for it's got a price of $125,000, Bob.
And is that now? This is a bit like the danger of going onto Reverb and valuing your guitar collection, because everyone's a millionaire, right? So you have to separate, asking price from realized price. But is that the realized price?
That's what it's going for.
Okay,
which is phenomenal.
Because there is this new market, for example, the Dave Grohl, the Pelham Blue 335, but kind of Trini Lopez 335 hybrid, the 6-in-line headstock, slashed holes. Really quite a nice guitar, but it's a modern Gibson. It's not vintage special or anything. But those DGs, which were probably $3,000 guitars going in, they're now exchanging hands for the better part of 10,000 because there were so few of them. And a lot of these limited run things are actually appreciating very nicely, and what that does is that attracts speculators too.
So I've got to correct what I just said because someone's going to ping me, Bob. It's 125,000 New Zealand dollars. It's been offered for sale for 75,000 US dollars.
75,000 US, which is high 60s UK. So anyway, if the guy's paid 50 for it within the last year and he's turned it around and he's made, let's say, 10 grand, 12 grand profit in my money, you're not going to get that at the bank, are you?
Are you interested in seeing that guitar? If someone said, "Look, let's go on a road trip and have a look at one of them,"
I'm always interested. I'm always interested, and I'm usually, having said that, I'm usually disappointed, and always for the same reason. And I figured it out. It's that all my old guitars, the skins, the finish is very, very thin, but they're making thin-skinned guitars now, and they're making them out of nitro rather than polyester and all the rest of it. But there's still a difference, and that is that the modern guitars, probably for ease of manufacture, when they're using this very thin-skinned nitro, they're still using what I understand is called too much plasticizer in the spray.
Okay.
And this plastic, and for understandable reasons, because most people don't want to spray a finish that they've just sprayed on to start cracking immediately. As it dries, they don't want that to happen, unless they're doing what do you call it? What's the word? Distressed. Yeah. Unless they're doing that. So for entirely understandable reasons, in manufacture, they put these plasticizers in. And it's these plasticizers that make the surface of the instrument feel different, particularly in the curve of my left fretting hand.
Sure.
And does it matter? No, because I've got modern guitars that are covered with plasticizer, and I love them and I play them. But if I'm comparing them to my old gear, there is a fundamental difference that, as an experienced player, I can feel almost instantaneously.
Wow.
And so that's a big difference. So that's why I say usually these repros are some kind of disappointment. But I will say one thing. some people who are watching this might have seen a video that my partner in crime, Ramon Goose, put up quite recently. He's just got some pickups in from a guy called, I think his name is Alan Dingwall. He's a pickup winder in Northern England. I hadn't heard of him before this episode, but apparently he's pretty well known. And everybody's winding greenie pickups these days.
Yep.
You know, whether they call them Bethnal Greens or whatever. Everybody's winding. They can do a 58 path now, so they're now going into what we did the greenie sets. And Ramon dropped a set of these into his ESP Navigator, which is a repro Sunburst Les Paul, quite flamey, by ESP in Japan, well made. And he did a demo. The neck pickup sounds good. The bridge pickup, little bit shrill, but the middle position, which is the greenie sound, best I've heard so far. And then another guitar demonstrator and great player, Phil Harris, who used to have a very big collection and a rental business in the UK. He's done a demo of these pickups as well, and his demo is equally convincing. So I think this Alan Dingwall guy has got the greeny middle sound closer than anybody else I've heard so far.
Oh, that's interesting, because I was very impressed with Ramon's video, and I'll attach a link, folks, to Ramon's video here if you're watching on a replay, because Ramon is a great friend of ours, and it's an interesting video. I got some Bethnal Greens put in mine, and obviously they were much closer to the greenie sound than the standard burst buckers that were in there, Bob.
Yeah.
I'd be keen to see where these Dingwalls go to later on. I'd be interested myself to see where they go. I've got a couple of questions that's burning in the back of my mind that I've got to ask you. Please, you're talking about how you get people to touch your 58 when you're at guitar shows. Yeah. And you were mentioning how you feel on the neck on some guitars when you pick them up. What's the first or what's the most common thing that people say to you about your 58 when they finally pick it up, or they put it on a strap, or put it into a playing position? What do they say to you?
There are two things, and it depends on what the ambient noise conditions are, right?
Okay.
If it's in a quiet space, which the last couple of shows have been quite quiet, so they can actually pick the guitar up and they can hear it acoustically.
Okay.
And the first bright as it. And that's absolutely true. The first time I got it home and plugged it in, I was amazed about how much more delicate it was. Always a bit you can hear it. Their comment is usually how bright and ringy and singy. It's almost, they say it's almost like a Fender. It's weird.
Wow.
Right? That's if they can hear it. If they can't hear it, then what their comments tend to revolve around is, first of all, because it's a 58, it's got quite a C-shaped neck. So the neck is quite big and not very modern. And so some of them find it a bit of a handful.
Okay.
And it's also, because it's a 58, not a 59, it's got the thinner pre-59 frets.
Okay.
And again, if you're used to modern frets, which are much more forgiving, the older frets, they just take a little getting used to. So there's usually a slight degree of, it's not exactly disappointment, but it's a sort of, I wasn't quite expecting that. Yeah? Because the combination of the big neck and the thin frets means, and especially when they start to bend, sometimes their fingers just slide off the strings. Now, not like at the same show we had recently, we had a beautiful condition 54 or 55 Black Beauty Les Paul Custom. Yeah. Really beautiful. And I think that's one of the most rock and roll looking guitars ever made. But it had the original frets.
Yeah.
Which are like a quarter of a millimeter high. And
wow.
Unless you were playing pure jazz, no bending and sliding at all, this guitar was pretty much impossible to play. There was just nothing to, nothing. There was no haptic feedback from your fingers.
Okay.
At all. So you can kind of see it was incredibly clever what Gibson did back in the day, because, you know, jazz guitar players are famous for stringing heavy, having very, very low actions, and not doing any bends. And this guitar is, whoa, amazing. If you put, I don't know, 13s on a 54 Les Paul Custom, and then played it completely note, no slithering around, this was probably the fastest thing anybody in that world had ever seen in their lives. It was probably incredible. But for the way modern players play, I was sliding all over the place. You know, it was almost like somebody had put casters on the bottom of my shoes, and not like roller skates, but going in every direction at once. I could hardly hold the thing.
Bob, have you got any vintage or classic guitar purchases in your mind coming up? Is there anything that you're considering or that you'd like to get into your collection that you'd like to share with us?
Yeah. For anybody who was watching the early part of this show, David Woodford's blown the lid on this little secret already, because he knows. I've actually pretty much stopped looking at guitars now in terms of purchases, because I think I've covered most of the bases. But there is this one huge, massive hole in my collection, which is a very early Telecaster.
Okay.
And I didn't realize that there was a hole in my collection, because I've got my regular working Telecaster is a 73 blonde. It's a little bit beat up. It's had lots of stuff done to it. The machine heads have been changed. The pickups have been changed. But it is my absolute, if I'm going out to a strange gig, it is the guitar that I know will never let me down. And it sounds great, but that's my Telecaster. Then one of my collector friends lent me his early 50s. And I had it for several days thinking, it's okay. And then suddenly I was playing one night and I just got it. And it was like a Damascene revelation. Oh, shit. Oh, this is what the fuss is all about.
Okay.
Wow. And since then, that is still probably the best guitar I've ever played anywhere. And that's in this company, right? So I borrow it whenever I can. A couple of other friends of mine have acquired similar instruments, so I get to occasionally pinch theirs for 2 or 3 days, which is fantastic.
Yep.
So I've realized, and also the way I play quite percussively. I play quite snappily.
Sure.
And of course, a Telecaster is brilliant for that. And like I was saying about the Les Paul, how the Les Paul actually feels brighter and more detailed than you'd expect. Well, the Telecaster, obviously, brightness and detail, that's its middle name.
Sure.
So I've realized that really I'm a Telecaster player, and I should therefore have the very best Telecaster that money can buy. Now, that's the good news. The bad news is that I've stopped work, so I'm now on what we Brits euphemistically call a fixed income. And so I'm trying to swim in a sea where the boat that's carrying the Telecaster is sailing away from me at 5 times the speed that I can swim. So I don't know whether I'm ever going to manage to land one of these guitars. I've thought very hard about whether I should trade one of my best and most expensive pieces in my existing collection. I thought really hard about it, and I thought, no, for all the arguments about my being a tele player and about the importance of this guitar, I can't peel myself away from anything big enough in my existing collection that would fund it. So I'm really kind of stuck, because I'm stuck between desire and the inability to afford. I'm on the case of one which I may yet be able to acquire for a horrible amount of money, but not nearly as horrible as the market is.
Is that locally or from the States?
It's locally. If I have to do it from the States, then I've got shipping. Okay. On a 30,000, 40,000 guitar, maybe $750 shipping isn't that much, but it's another $750.
Okay.
Then the authorities quite rightly have got much better on import taxes and duties these days. So it's unusual now to get something of any financial consequence through customs I used to just take my chances, and probably 4 times out of 5 I got lucky.
Good.
Back in the day. Now it's probably 4 times out of 5 you'd get unlucky. So that means you're talking about putting another 20% on whatever you spend.
Oh, holy cow!
That's 6, 8, 10,000 more. And of course, the other thing is that you're doing something which I have done in the past, but it's a hell of a risk to buy something sight unseen. You know, you might find that you've bought an absolute beauty, but as a player, it's a dog, and then you're now holding the baby. So local is better if you can do it. But again, back to what I said right at the head of this conversation, the problem is that the available stock, locally, outside the US is relatively diminished.
Yeah, well, that was my next question. You were talking about the population of 58s and 59s in the UK.
Yeah.
What would the population be of, a good early Telecaster in the UK?
Well, it seems as if there are a few more. It seems that, and one of the reasons is that pretty much back in the mid 60s, the Les Paul was a dog. It had been discontinued in 61 or 60. And nobody was really taking much notice until Keith Richard and the rest of the blues guys did stuff. But, they were sitting in shops, probably couldn't get rid of them.
Wow.
But apart from that small period, ever since then, once people got the hang of it, whether it was £200 in a world where anything else was only 100, or whether it's $500,000 in a world where everything else is maybe $10,000, but the Les Paul has always been a sovereign, fantastic, holy grail unicorn guitar. The Telecaster has really only come into its own in most spheres in the last 7 or 8 years. Okay. It was a bit of a Cinderella guitar for a long, long, long time, and added to the fact that all those original Telecasters, they're really frumpy to look at, whereas a Sunburst Les Paul with a bit of flame is a sexy piece of furniture.
Yeah.
So I think those two reasons, the Telecaster's day has really only come. I mean, yeah, sure, you can talk about Danny Gatton, you can talk about Mike Campbell, all the guys who've made iconic sounds with early Telecasters and who've known what I now know, and they've known it for 40 years.
Yeah.
And there's a bunch of guys, particularly around Nashville, who know that shit. Yeah. But as a global market, the Telecaster's been overlooked and overlooked and overlooked. And yet the truth is, if you got a container of every example of a fabulous guitar, you would, at the top of the pile would have to be a 50, 51, 52 Telecaster. That would have to be one of the cardinal essential instruments, along with a good burst, along with a great 335, along with, probably if you're being fussy, a 57 and a 62 Strat. They would be, but your 52 Telecaster would be, and it would sit there with the Les Paul. It would sit there as king and queen.
Well, today I understand is the birthday of Les Paul, so we wanna honour Les Paul and his birthday. I saw that on some social media posts before I went live with you, Bob. I'm going to take the conversation a little bit leftward. What's your opinion on SGs? See, we're talking about Les Paul and Les Pauls. We know the famous conversation Les Paul had with Gibson about SGs. Give us your opinion on SGs.
So my first decent guitar when I was a youngster was an SG.
Oh.
I started playing when I was about 13, 14, after hearing the first Led Zeppelin album. That's what got me going. I had no idea what I was listening to, but at the same time, I had a very strong feeling this was going to be very important to my life. And so it has been. So I had some cheap guitars, and I was set away to boarding school, so I had plenty of time to noodle around and play and form school bands, and nothing else to do at boarding school, really, just work and hang out. So after playing for about 2.5, 3 years, I was lobbying my dad over a pint. This is, by the way, when I was young. I was tall enough when I was young to be able to go into a pub. So I'd been drinking a pint of lager with my dad when I was maybe 15, 16. Illegal, but hey.
Brilliant.
Come and get me for it. Anyway, I was lobbying him like crazy for a Gibson, mainly because I was spending all my time listening to Paul Kossoff. And eventually he folded and he said, okay, on your 16th birthday, I'll get you one. And so we went down to Selma's, the shop in Charing Cross Road, the famous Selma's, where the sales assistant was, they had Paul Kossoff as a sales assistant once, and they had John McLaughlin and all kinds of other guys. The sales assistant who looked after us was a much more obscure player, but a breathtaking jazz player called Amancio de Silva, who was Indian, probably Portuguese Indian or something with a name like Amancio de Silva. And he demonstrated the guitar to us. And my father and I are kind of looking at it going, oh, shit. Is this what you're supposed to do with one of these? We can't do that. Oh, no. Oh, it was kind of off-putting. But anyway, we bought this guitar, and it was a 1972 from new Gibson SG Deluxe.
Wow.
Horrible. At the time, I thought I've arrived. Elvis is in my building.
Okay.
But with hindsight, middle of the Norlin era, right? And if you go from top to bottom, paddle headstock, ugly, pretty thin neck, narrow and thin.
Oh,
so
okay.
Quite fast for young fingers. But if you pick that guitar up today and compared it with the kind of things that we can now play, you'd go, oh, this is like a little broomstick. It's horrible. Yeah. Moving up the neck. That's crucified the neck enough. Body, the SG of that era had different body chamfers to it. The chamfers inside the horn cutaways weren't there. The chamfers around the edge of the body were more accentuated, so they actually messed with the not the footprint of the guitar, but of all the chamfering. They messed with it, which made it a bit weird. It had a Bigsby. Now, I know there'll be people watching this who love Bigsbys. Be my guest. I hate the things. I think they're ugly.
Yeah.
And they don't really return to tune very well for me. So I really hate the things. I have no Bigsbys on any of my guitars. Occasionally I play one. It's interesting. But if you ask me to play a Fender Jazzmaster and that weird, whatever they call it, long arm vibrato, wow, I love those. I like a fixed arm Bigsby on a Gretsch. Yeah. Because they seem to work. But Bigsby's on Telecasters, Bigsby's on Gibsons, not for me, thanks, not at all. So it had a Bigsby. It had two T-top humbuckers, which have subsequently everyone thinks they're great. They're all right. They're quite hot. They're okay. And it was the year that they made the covers with the embossed Gibson stamped into the chrome cover, which I hated and which I have always hated. I think they look ghastly. Again, there's an aftermarket for these things. And I found my chrome covers when I did my house up 2 years ago. I found them in a box. I put them on eBay and I made very good coin.
Wow.
For those. And talk about getting rid of something that you hated and being paid for it. It was wonderful. So I got rid of those. So that the pickups were basically good, but horrible. And finally, just to continue the crucifixion of this guitar, the controls were mounted on the front of the guitar on a semicircular plate of 3-ply or 4-ply with a beveled edge, black, white, black. So you had 2-volume, 2-tone, and a pickup switch, and the input jack mounted on this semicircular plate. This was obviously, for production efficiency. So the accountants at Norlin had basically moved in on this instrument and stripped all the good bits out and made it, mass producible. The guys at Fender were doing the same thing. And so the guitars made around that time were generally, though not universally, pretty awful. And this was a pretty good example of a pretty awful guitar. That was my main guitar for many years, and I loved it. But then I traded that later for something and kind of moved on. And that really affected, as I got to know more about guitars, I realized that it was a fantastic present from my dear old man.
Sure.
It was beautiful of him to do that for me, and it really got me going and kept me going and all the rest of it, but wasn't a good guitar. So my view of SGs is rather infected. Now this is a tragedy, because if you come across the predecessor to my guitar from say 1962, so an SG standard from 62,
Yeah.
As long as you don't touch the silly sideways vibrola, horrible mechanism, as long as you leave that alone or lock it off, those are probably about the fastest playing electric guitars you'll ever meet. They have necks and actions to die for.
So you've seen a few of them. You've played a few of them.
I've never owned another SG, but I've
you've seen,
I've
but
played
you've seen
lots,
them.
and
Okay.
I've one thing I do, I swap guitars with friends all the time. So I might say, I really fancy, living with your SG for a week. What do you want of
Okay.
mine? Let's just do a trade,
Okay.
for a week or so. So I get
Yeah.
lots of guests through here. So I play lots of things, and these, particularly those early SG standards, particularly, I've never played one that didn't play like the wind, and it makes you
Wow.
play. It's a light guitar. It's shoutier than a heavier Les Paul, so it makes you play faster rock and rolly type stuff. Maybe
Okay.
AC/DC.
Yeah.
They're wonderful guitars. And then I obviously my love of P90s and my love of single pickup guitars. So then a friend of mine picked up an SG Junior, and I played that, and that was magnificent. And that weighed about as much as a biscuit.
Wow.
And played like a dream, sounded amazing. And now several friends of mine have got those, so I can get my hands on those. And then recently, a fellow exhibitor at the last guitar show, who has a lot of very nice ES guitars, he's also got several really nice SGs. He's got a refinished 62 standard in white, but it plays like a dream. He's got a 62 Junior that is in beautiful condition and plays and sounds fantastic. He's got a 63 Special, like the Pete Townsend guitar. Bloody fantastic. So, although I don't own an SG, the SGs that I've come across in my later days, rather than early days, have all been bloody brilliant. And relatively speaking to the 50s stuff, these things are still sleeper prices.
Interesting. And so I just want to throw in another question, and we touched upon it on the first show we did. Yeah. Your love for Firebirds, and you were talking about your Tokai. I understand it's a Tokai Firebird. Just tell us a little bit about that, because I think that's fascinating for folks that might want to watch the replay, because you think you'll put that up against any Gibson, if I remember rightly.
Yeah, I think so. So my love of Firebirds is kind of a strange thing, because again, it's rather like the SG story. I had a kind of early experience, and then a later experience that made me realize that my early experience had been an infected experience rather than a genuine one. Yeah.
Okay.
So basically, a long time ago, I was put together when I had my SG, my Gibson SG. So we're talking mid-70s. I was put together with another guitarist who had a very similar background to me, similar schooling, all the rest of it. And he had what we would now know as a 1976 Medallion Firebird 5. Right. Twin pickups, medallion on the upper bout. And this was a Gibson reissue of the Firebird, probably a 10th anniversary or something like that. And I remember going around, they were expensive guitars, and he was a good player. And I remember going around with my SG and playing this Firebird and thinking, oh, this is going to be a bit of a belittling experience, because these are supposed to be really good. And I hated it. I just hated it. And for many years, that was the only Firebird I'd played. And again, I didn't like it. Okay. And then you started seeing a few more players using Firebirds and getting good sounds out of it. Nothing really happened for a long time. And then many years later, only about 10 years ago, I befriended my dear but sadly now late friend, Alan Darby.
Yes.
And Alan was a wonderful guitarist, obsessive tone freak, die-hard Peter Green fan, all the right credentials. And he'd taken a decision in his career, partly because he liked the feel and the tone of a Firebird with the tone control rolled back a little, because they really are like chainsaws if it's full out. But also because he was looking for a way of being distinctive, and everybody's playing Les Pauls and Strats.
Sure.
Yeah. And a few SGs and a few 335s. Nobody's playing a Firebird. So he thought, well, that'll be my calling card. So he's going on stages doing all these big rock and roll events, and there's only one guy with a Firebird. So everyone remembers the Firebird guy. So he did it for that. And he therefore amassed a reasonable collection of old and then more recently new. And that introduced me to my Firebird 1, which is a Gibson historic custom shop from 2012, which he used to own, and his estate is being liquidated now. So its brother, the one he owned, is currently, I don't know if it's actually up for sale or being sold, but it's in the market.
Okay.
Along with a really nice Firebird 5, and also his, I think his is number 6. There were 50 Eric Clapton reissues launched at the Crossroads show in Dallas 2019.
Okay.
Gibson made a reissue of the Eric Clapton guitar that he played in the later days of Cream and through Blind Faith.
Sure.
So by the time the Les Paul had been stolen, he's playing the Red 335 and the Firebird 1. And there's a recording of, I've said this before, I'm sure, there's a recording on YouTube of Clapton playing the beginning of Sitting on Top of the World. I think it's in Dallas, the gig. It's in 1968.
Yes.
And the introduction, it's probably recorded on a cassette recorder, and there's even a little snip in the sound, so it's a bit of a muddle. But you listen to this guitar playing, it's probably the best electric guitar playing I've ever heard in my life. It's exquisite. It's emotional. It's very angry. It's extremely angry. It's very tense. And the sound, but the playing and the sound is magnificent. That's a Firebird 1. So Firebirds, and particularly Firebird 1s, came to me as a great big wave late in life again, like SGs. Now that's the Firebird story. In the meantime, I've also got one of those cheapo Epiphone Bonamassa Firebird 1s.
Oh, wow.
Which I picked up for very little money a couple of years ago in the UK. And that's a superb, modern, cheap guitar. Superb. You could do a stadium gig with that guitar tonight. It's perfect. Wow. And I've also got this Tokai FB40, which is slightly wrong shaped to get around the lawsuits. The bottom horn is a bit too fat and clunky. It's cherry sunburst.
Yeah.
But again, it feels and plays amazing, and it cost me £200.
Oh my Lord!
And I've gigged it, and it's fantastic. So I've got this funny collection of Firebirds, but I've also got, again, my extended family of collectors. A few of them have got the odd Firebird. So if I'm really jonesing for a Firebird for a few days, I can probably make a telephone call, go on a little drive, and borrow one for a few days.
Yeah, I've seen that video many times, the one that you did with Ramon, where you guys are talking about your Firebirds, and yeah, that Tokai is beautiful, Bob.
It's lovely, you know. It's a great, and we used to, the guy who sold it to me, he was selling a lot of guitars to try and get enough money together for a 335 or something, and he said, look, do you want to buy it? I'll sell it to you for what I paid for it. And we used to call it the Comedy Firebird. Do you want to buy the Comedy Firebird, which is what it's called? So, but it's a brilliant, brilliant guitar. So guitars have not got to cost £5,000 or £20,000 or £500,000. They have not got to cost that. The Bonamassa cost me £300, which admittedly was a good deal.
Sure.
The Tokai, £200. And if you said, Bob, you got to go out tonight. I've got a gig late tonight. You got to go out and you got to play one of those. I'll go, fine. Happy.
What did Alan think of your Tokai when he played it?
This is more about Alan and his personality. He was not a snob, but he was a seasoned old pro musician, and he looked down his nose at it, and it's kind of, it was sort of, look, this is a perfectly good guitar. You and I both know it, but for the purpose of this conversation, I'm going to treat it like a toy. It was that kind of conversation. Because obviously, I mean, he was preoccupied as a professional performer. He was preoccupied not only with his own talent and ability, but also with his image. And so he really wouldn't have been seen dead holding the thing. But when he played it, it sounded just like him, sounding great.
Oh, I love it. Fantastic.
Yeah. Now, when we did a little exchange before this show, I said one thing that I had on my mind that I might want to talk about a little bit was it's guitar related, obviously, but It's to do with open nights.
Yeah.
Do you want me to hold forth on that for a bit?
I've shared that thought with a few other people that you're going to be talking about that, so please do.
Okay. Now, I don't want to offend anybody, but I may be quite controversial here. Okay. Well, the simple reason is I've been to quite a lot. I don't go to like 5 a week like some guys do, but pretty much most weeks I'm out somewhere.
Sure.
I think it's a really good thing to do. First of all, you meet lots of great people.
Yeah.
You come across all kinds of musicians. Some of them really trying hard to get a lot better. Some of them really, really very, very good indeed. You get to talk bollocks about music and mainly blues because that's the format. You get to talk about guitars and stuff. You make friends. It's great.
Yes.
So I try and do them quite a lot. And I wish there were more. And London is particularly not good for open nights. The rural areas further away from London are better, I think, because they've got less to do and the pubs are grateful for the footfall. But so sometimes I do have to travel some distance to go to these open nights. And if you're going to turn up and maybe get your 2 or 3 songs of fame maximum, you may be driven an hour and a half for 10 minutes of playing. And then you've got an hour and a half's drive home. So you've got to mean it. You've got to be serious.
Yeah. Sure.
Also, you're going to spend a shitload on petrol. But so I still try and do these things. And I've been to some really, really good ones. I've organized a few, what I hope were pretty good ones. But I've also been to some absolute stinkers.
Oh.
And the difference between a good one and a stinker is about 1 inch. And the inch is made up entirely of thought. Right?
Okay.
If you're going to go to all the trouble of persuading or even renting a pub or a space to let you have one of these, that's the same amount of work, whether you do the greatest open night you've ever had or the worst. Same amount of work. Right? No difference at all. So it's all down to then the next thing, which is, first of all, do you have competent musicians as your house band? That's a necessity. Fortunately, mostly the answer is yes. Mostly. There are a few open nights where they don't have any musicians at all. Literally, everyone turns up and plays. That's a problem when 17 guitarists turn up and there isn't a drummer or a bass player in the house.
Oh, gosh.
That's a problem. So there is a minimum level. You need to have a house band, and hopefully they're good enough to be able to kind of undertake all requests. In other words, they have a sufficient repertoire to be able to play a bit of blues, a bit of bluesy rock, maybe a few Dylan songs, so whoever's turn it is in front has got something to work on. Yeah?
Yeah.
So that's that. But the next thing is really obvious. I've been to open nights where they haven't had any backline, like they haven't had any amplifiers. Well, that's fine if they publish it and say, bring your own amplifier. But if you don't, and most of the time I don't, or if you're going on the tube or on a bus, or on a bicycle, and you turn up with an electric guitar as no fucking amplifier, well, you tell me what kind of a night you're going to have, right? So I know this sounds completely obvious, but I have been to examples of these actual things within the last 12 months.
Oh, my Lord.
Right? And as an experienced player, yeah, I get a bit pissed off, actually. I do. And now there's a subsection of this, which is for those gigs that do have backline. I've been to one where the backline was so terrible that I would challenge even a world-class guitarist to get a reasonable sound.
Oh,
right?
gosh.
So awful. So while you've gone to all the effort of booking a place and then lugging an amplifier, well, why not make sure the fucking amplifier works?
Yeah.
Yeah? It's not much of an ask. It hasn't got to be a vintage Dumble.
No.
It could be a nice little modern Vox AC13. It could be a Fender Deluxe or a Princeton.
Yeah.
Blah. A little Laney. Anything. Make it work. Yeah. So there is another jam I go to. I drive a long distance to a place called Banbury, which is about an hour and a half from my home. And they have, their back line is spectacular. They always have my friend Cliff Brown's 633 amps because the house band all play through 633 amps. So when I go there, I'm driving for an hour and a half, and I'm going, I know I'm going to sound good tonight. The question is, am I going to play well? I know I'm going to sound fantastic. This is going to be, you know. So why don't you make it for your punters? Why don't you make it that kind of experience? They're coming along and they know that they're going to be given an opportunity to sound good. Yeah. So that's about the equipment. The next thing is about the material. This is where you have to separate a jam from an open night. Sure. The way I see it, a jam, you turn up and you play usually around a recognizable rock or blues format. So very simple, not too many, you know, not too much Steely Dan, no clever chords, no funny rhythmic changes.
Yeah.
You know, nobody trying to be too West Coast clever. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's what I call a jam. An open night has different meanings to different people. It can include what I've just described, or it could be something where you turn up and you're the kind of guy who maybe rocks up with an acoustic guitar and you do your party piece. You might have 2 Dylan songs and a Donovan song that you want to play.
Yep.
And the band kind of follows behind you. Yep. And it's your sort of little 5 minutes of fame in your otherwise quiet life.
Yep.
Really important for the organizers to actually establish when they advertise these things, which it is. Because if you're a guitar player and you turn up to an open night, well, the first thing is you don't sing. So, and then what do? Do you play your party piece, which is a Freddie King instrumental, or were you expecting to play along with a singer and maybe put a solo in? Already you're off balance and you haven't even started playing a note yet. So that's the next thing you have to get right. And in my experience, about just over 50% of people who organize these things understand this and get it right. The rest of it is just like, let's all go to a pub and it's a bit of rock and roll. Ugh, it's too random, right? Which means it's not worth traveling for. It's not worth going out of an evening for.
Yeah.
Then the next thing is choice of material. So if you're doing, and I went to one jam, it's the worst jam I've ever been to, and it was quite recent, where it was very jazzy in flavor, and that hadn't been advertised. And as you know, jazz and blues and rock overlap, but they're really not the same.
No.
I mean, in musical terms, instead of 1-4-5, it's basically 2-5-1, but that's really simplifying it down. Also, all the conventions about how the band plays, playing the head, playing the verse, going back to the head, going to the middle, all the sign language, everything's different. And all the chords are different. So, for example, if you see an A written down on the chart, it's probably an A dominant 7th. It's probably an A major 7th. If you see an A 7th, it's a dominant 7th, things like that. In other words, there's language things that a blues and rock musician might not understand that are natural in jazz. Then you've got then to fit in with the horns, everything's in sharp and flat keys, which means for a guitarist, it's unusual spacings.
Oh.
And then a lot of the chords are very highly altered as well. So whereas we might be happy at playing, rocking around a chord sequence of A, C, D, G, A, rocking around and playing a sort of Freebird-like solo for 2 minutes.
Yeah.
No, here we're going to start with, I don't know, C sharp major 7. We might go to an F altered, sharp 9s, flat 9s, 11ths, 13ths. And if you're a rock musician and you're given one of these charts, you're in deep shit. Now, this is all terribly clever if you're one of these academic musicians, or if you spent the last 30 years of your life in Steely Dan. But you didn't, did you? No, nor did anyone else. So, terrible. Now, what happened at this last session, which is the cardinal sin that made all this shit that I've talked about, this is the worst of all. The first song they called, I explained to them twice when I was signing up to play, I'm a guitar player. I'm a sideman.
Yeah.
So I'm expecting somebody to come along and sing a song, and I'll maybe take a solo going in and maybe a solo in the middle and maybe going out. Yeah. Along some pretty simple fodder. Yeah. So the first song they started playing was a complicated jazz-influenced ska song.
Oh, gosh.
Unusual. I can play reggae and ska, not very well.
Oh, gosh. I can't. That's not easy.
The clue's in the white skin and the grey-white hair, I'm not trying to appropriate that culture. I can knock it out, but this was difficult. But the second song of my 2, I've forgotten something. This was a jam where the house guitarist would not yield the only amplifier, so they plugged me straight into the PA.
Oh, shit.
Anyone listening to this who plays guitar will know just how awful you can make a guitar sound direct injecting into a desk.
Oh, it's bad.
Fortunately, I carry a box that gets me out of that hole.
Okay.
But if I hadn't, I would have sounded like a piece of shit if I'd played like a god. But worse. So we now got, I'm playing through the PA. I've got no idea I've never heard the piece of music before, but it was a known piece of music. You could hear it on the radio. Don't know what I'm doing. So I basically just turned the guitar down and looked very committed and mimed. But the second song they called was an original. Their original.
Oh, no.
So nobody in the world outside of that stage had ever heard it before. You couldn't look it up on YouTube. Realizing my predicament, the bass player passed me his phone, which had the chart, which was a jazz chart.
Oh.
So flattened, sharpened, altered, everything. And I can read those chords, but not at speaking speed, right?
Okay.
And even worse, this for me is I've now baked you this enormous filthy cake. I'm now going to put this stinking turd on top as a cherry, right? The chart he gave me was in E. I've got enough experience to know from jamming with people that we were playing around a tone center of B flat. That is the devil's interval away from E. It is the furthest around the clock you can possibly be wrong. So I'm now trying to read a chart that I can't read at speed and transpose it through 6 semitones.
Oh.
And I'm thinking, Jesus Christ, this is the kind of thing that my friends who are serious first call musicians, like the guy who did the guitars for the coronation recently, that kind of guy get paid good money to operate under this pressure, and even they struggle with this. And here we are in a pub. This is a catastrophe. So what did I do? I did something I've never done in my life. I basically stood up in front of an audience and jammed along at the front of a band, played these 2 songs with my volume control turned off.
Wow.
I mimed.
Wow.
That's how bad it was. It was so bad that I've told them how bad it was. And this is something you don't do. As a musician, you don't do this. Everyone rubs along. Everyone's really nice to each other all the time. Yeah. This was so awful. They said, "Did you enjoy yourself?" I said, "Not at all. I'm never coming back. Not this. Never. You must be joking. You really need to sort yourself out." Of course, they thought I was just a complete CUNNT.
Yes.
I never met anybody like me who'd actually say boo to a goose. But for me, this was obscene. So I'm on a bit of a hobby horse about this, and I've actually written a couple of pieces about, look, I don't know everything, but this is how to organize a good night.
Look, I'm intrigued and interested that they thought that it would be good on an open night to play an original. That's nuts, Bob.
The only people who can play an original at an open night, if a whole band turns up to an open night and takes the stage together,
is that band? Yes.
Of course. Otherwise, you're completely right. It's suicidal.
It's nuts.
Yeah. And that's if the original's got 4 chords in it.
Yeah.
I mean, if the original's got 27 altered chords, the only thing about this kind of music, there's one way you can get out of it, by the way, if you really want to, I would have excused myself to go to the loo. Yeah, well, I wish I could. Thank you, Holly. I wish I could. The only way of getting out of this is that you can play chromatically and quite quickly. And anyone who's listening, they go, yeah, actually, this is bullshit. But it does kind of sound more right than it does wrong. So chromatic, legato, quick. And what happens is that you stumble over all the right notes while you're stumbling over all the wrong notes. And the audience is on your side. And so they hear more of the right notes than the wrong notes. So a little bit of bullshit for the guitar players out there. Play quickly and chromatically, and you can get away with murder in these situations for about 30 seconds.
After that,
you just You just sound like that. Yeah.
How's that fun though, Bob? It can't be fun for an average open.
Usually, even the poorer ones of these, that you can usually find something to look on the bright side of and say, yeah, that was fun. Or you can have a bit of a laugh about something. Seldom do you get to a situation where everything is so stacked against it and you that you just go, I can't do anything here. Maybe it's my inexperience. I don't know, but I've got nothing to offer here, and that's why I turned my volume control down. And when I've told all my friends, and it's a bit like your listeners and viewers by now, they realise that I can't shut up anyway. So the idea of me turning my own volume control down is, I'd rather eat my own fist.
So, tell us a little bit more about the gig that you turned up to where there was no amplifier. I'm intrigued about that. Who advertised that gig? Was it the pub itself? Is it the pub that's advertising this open night, jam night?
Usually the way these things, either people run these open nights and they've got their own little Facebook page or Instagram page or something like that, or the people who are organizing it will piggyback a page on the pub's website. So usually it's the pub might go, hey, we have an open night on Wednesdays and we've got a quiz on Fridays or whatever, that kind of thing. Or, we've got an interesting live act, so-and-so coming into play for us from the States or whatever on Saturday, kind of thing. But quite often what they do is they give over a page to the organizers. So and the organizers basically say, okay, well, where is it? When is it? But the more information you can give without deluging people, just simple things like, there will be a house band. Good. Which kind of means bass and drums, minimum. Keyboards would be lovely. There'll be amplifiers. So, guitarists don't need to bring an amplifier. But some of the older blues jams, the bigger blues jams in the UK, they used to have a no pedals policy.
Yeah.
Which was a great leveler. But I always used to ignore that. I always used to pack a pedal in my pocket and just go on stage, already wired up, already tuned, and just plug the pedal instead of the guitar into the amp. I'd have the pedal set the way I wanted it. So I had somewhere to go. And also I had some control over my tone. Yeah. I usually ignore that. And unless I'm actually kicked off stage, I said, no pedals, mate, get off, which nobody has ever done. Because as soon as you get up and you play respectfully, you use your volume control. You don't just play over everybody for 10 minutes. You play inside. Yeah. Play inside the pocket, inside the groove. When it comes to a solo, step out. As long as you behave yourself, nobody cares if you use a pedal or not. It's only if you turn up with a drive pedal, max it. Actually, there's a great story here. At a very, very great venue, no longer with us now, Charlotte Street Blues. Fantastic blues jam venue in London. Great bar. Like the kind of place that people walk into in a scene from a Hollywood movie. And there's a great band playing. One of those bars. Just a really good feeling. I went along one night and there was this... There was a young Italian guy with quite a pointy strat, and he came up to play open night, so strange musicians put together, and he started playing very quickly, quite loud, quite chromatically, right? And he just carried on. So then the rest of the band started up. The singer started singing. He is, by the way, in a completely different key to the rest of the band and the singer. He played all the way through. When it came to playing a solo, he just kept on doing exactly the same thing at the same volume. And then when the singer came back in, and then when the other guitarist came back in, and then when the saxophone player came back in, and so it's just like you and me having this conversation with somebody sitting right here going. I've never seen anything like it. This man had no self-awareness whatsoever. And even a no pedals policy wouldn't have filtered him out.
Italians, Bob.
Technically, he had facility, but he had absolutely no awareness at all. So he wasn't a musician.
No. And I think that's the fair that some people have been talking about on social media with some of these really, really good young people taking advantage of social media who can play all the licks, all the scales, everything that Holly mentioned in her comment,
Yeah.
Mixolydian, Aeolian and Dorian Gray modes. But when it comes to a jam bob or an open night mic situation, you're going to be lost.
Yeah. At the same time, just yesterday, somebody sent me a Facebook, I think it was on Facebook. This young guy, I don't know how old this boy is. He's probably 9 years old. He was playing an SG, playing kind of blues. Oh, God, he was good. Oh, he had the dynamics and the phrasing. And I thought, okay, you're probably only doing this in your bedroom at the moment, but you could so easily, you could take this out with a week's preparation. You could take this out and you could perform. And if that's what you're like when you're 9, it was kind of like those old videos of your Joe Bonamassas and your Derek Trucks and your Marcus King, when they were young and they were already aged maybe 13. Pretty amazing. And I looked at this young man and thought, there's another one.
He's another one.
You're on it. And actually at the guitar show the other week, even better, there was a young girl, really young, maybe 6, maybe 7, playing electric guitar on one stand. And little tiny fingers. She was a small kid. And I looked and thought, oh dear, here we go. Oh, keep up with this, honey. You are going to be way interesting by the time you're 10. She knew exactly what she was doing. She was fantastic. So for me, I mean, this is even more surprising because still, girls and electric guitars, minority. So young, such little fingers, playing a full-size guitar. I thought, oh, this girl's going to be wonderful.
Wow.
She was really, really exciting.
Wow.
I said to her dad, please do whatever you can to make sure she keeps this up. This is wonderful.
What did he say?
Yeah. Oh, he looked, he was obviously dead proud.
Good.
And he said, well, it's early days yet, kids, eh? And I said, yeah, I know. She could be into bikes or dance routines by the end of next month. Who knows? But if she keeps it going, she'll be sensational.
Okay, well, thank you for giving us some positive.
And talking of young people, but not nearly as young. He's in his 30s. But I went to see a guy called Chris Buck play the other day, who you probably heard of.
Yes.
He's making quite a name for himself. He's got a really nice he plays mainly in the major scale.
Yes.
And his band Cardinal Black did a gig in North London about a month ago. Went to see it. They were really good.
Yeah, one of my co-hosts on the channel, the rock professor Simon Williams, loves Chris Buck, loves him, has been talking about him for years on the channel. He's got a great channel talking about guitars and gears as well, Bob,
right.
So as well as being a player. Welsh guy, I understand.
Okay. Yeah.
But yeah, it'll be interesting to see where he goes because I wouldn't have picked him in his 30s. I would have said late 20s. That's interesting.
Maybe he's just turned 30 or something. He's around. He's youngish, but he's got to confront the same issue as all the guys who are hot guitar players have. You've got to become a singer.
Yes.
And accompany yourself with your voice, because otherwise you've got to hire a singer, which means you're going to split the meager revenue that you can get. So so you get people like Clapton, who's developed an amazing voice. Robin Ford, who, poor bugger, has to sing, but it still sounds like twang, twang, twang when he sings. And then he puts his fingers on the guitar and heaven breaks out,
Yeah.
And another band I went to see recently was Marcus King, who I saw previously in America. And he was still in the very kind of, hey, how you doing? How you having a good time? Very shouty,
Yeah.
But his guitar playing was fierce. In the intervening 3 years, he's figured that he's going to have to be a band leader. And so he spent more time leading a band with horns and Hammond than he did playing fantastic Widdly Widdly. And to the extent that he had a second guitarist on stage with him, who most of the time was playing rhythm, but this guy took 2 solos. And bearing in mind, you're in a young Guitar Heroes band and you're the rhythm player. This guy's solos were extraordinary.
Wow.
They were so good. They were. So Marcus has actually made a mistake. He's got a rhythm guitar who is as good as or more than him.
Was he playing his ES?
Yeah, mainly. He played, and there's a lot of SGs coming up in this conversation today. He played an SG as well, but mainly ES, yeah. And he played pretty great. He played pretty great. But he's clearly decided that he's got to be a band leader and a showman and an entertainer, that being a guitar hero isn't enough.
So I find that an interesting little thing that you've just presented to us. So I'm going to ask you a couple of questions.
Sure.
You know how these young guys always reinvent themselves, or they seem to be reinventing themselves a lot now.
Yeah.
On the music scene. We saw it with John Mayer over the years, with a band playing with Pino Palladino and, then going and doing all this other things with other people. Do you think Marcus is just doing this, getting this band leader experience as part of that growth that he needs as a guitar player and as a musician and as a man? Is this something that maybe it's just a period in his time, Bob?
Well, so yes, in the sense that every musician is on their own. The word I hate people using, journey, but they're on their own journey, trajectory, whatever.
Okay.
And so yes. All of us change and evolve in terms of taste and presentation over time. When you're a professional, you have to think about how to make a living out of it. Yeah. And so that means that there are many people in the world who are doing stuff that people just don't want to buy, in which case you're not going to be a professional very long because you're not going to earn any money. So,
sure.
So in that sense, when you're a professional, there are external pressures on you, commercial pressures, if you like. And I'm sure he's responding to those. I think he probably, like most musicians who play a lot, tends towards more complicated kinds of music. So he'll be tending towards not jazz, but a jazzier feel, a more complicated harmonic feel. And so he'll be evolving in that sense as well. And then where it takes him, I don't know. I mean, I think the idea is that he's taking it there, partly because as a musician he wants to, and partly as a commercial entertainer because he realizes that this is a future livelihood, if you like, Okay. You as a guitar player, you make a choice. You're either going to go into a world where you're going to entertain people somehow, or you're going to go into a world where you're a session player and a sideman and a brilliant guitarist. You can be both, and John Mayer's interesting, of course, because he's one of the very rare players who's got two parallel careers. He's a fuck-off blues player, and he's also he makes and plays pop.
Yes.
Not auto-tuned teenage pop, but pop. And also he's got enough looks and doing the pop thing to attract a big female audience. Whereas being a blues hero, you can whistle for that. Yes. And the fact that he's had a couple of, major celebrity girlfriends and all the rest of it. So Mayer is really two people. He's the guitarist that probably most of the people watching this follow, and he's the other bloke that makes the money.
Good point. I think Derek Trucks recently made this comment, Bob, about how the Derek Trucks band or the Tedeschi Trucks band have a responsibility as musicians now because of the big band that they have, 12-piece band or whatever. So the decisions that he's making and his wife are making about where they go musically now has to include this band. And I thought that was an interesting point for him to bring up because obviously, it's like any business entrepreneur. If you own a business, whatever decisions you're making aren't just affecting you and your income as the business owner, as the entrepreneur, but it's the livelihoods of the people working for you as well. So, yeah.
Exactly right. And I mean, in the case of Tedeschi Trucks, of course, they've got a different interesting thing because you've got a man and a woman who happen to be spouses, but a man and a woman, both very capable. Well, one absolutely top of the pyramid, world-class player, and one really excellent professional level player. Woman who can sing great, and a woman who can sing a diverse set of Americana to include the blues and stuff that naturally houses the husband's slide playing, but also includes quite a lot of soul influence stuff. So they're in a good place because they can touch lots of different bases and therefore appeal to lots of audiences, which means they can make a compound audience of size that will return. So that's the way they do it. But you're right. They've got a responsibility to their staff. They're just like a little business. You know, how do we bring in enough money to make ourselves a living as the shareholders in this business, but also keep being able to pay the wages? And of course, when you're in a band and you're touring, the wages go way beyond the stage.
So, Marcus King, you saw him, there was a 3-year gap. You were pretty impressed with him when you saw him recently, but you think, you know, this young other guitar player that he's got with him could overshadow him. So that's an interesting observation,
Well,
Bob.
For me as a guitarist, also I had the foresight to take my earplugs that night, so I could actually hear more than I usually heard.
Good.
Because I got rid of all the noise. I always intend to take them and very seldom remember, but I took them, and so I could hear a lot. And certainly for me on the night, this unknown guitarist to the far right actually overshadowed the band leader who is a guitar hero.
Yeah.
Right.
He's a hot guitar player. Yeah.
And this guy was, you know, it was really magnificent, beautiful playing.
Wow.
And I thought the guy was kind of there as a rhythm playing stooge, you know? And when he let go, wow, it's fantastic. And I remember years and years ago, many years ago, I saw a Louisiana-based accordion player called Joel Sonnier, who kind of lived somewhere between blues and Zydeco. And he came over and did a tour in the UK, and I saw him at a small gig, and he had this really sort of skinny Latino young guitar player who played a foam green Fender Strat through a Fender Twin, really basic setup. And this young guitarist was extraordinary. Just unbelievable. I still don't know his name. I've got no idea who he was. He was unbelievable. You know, so I really like these gigs where somebody turns up and you think, yeah, you know, sideman, rhythm player, whatever, and they take a solo and you go, oh, this is world class. You know, fantastic. And this young man was world class. Actually, Marcus King was so busy being a band leader and a singer and running this big band that his guitar playing, which was still pretty fantastic, but it was definitely not in the driving seat.
Interesting.
It's
You wouldn't
really
expect that. If you went and saw Clapton play, you wouldn't expect Doyle to be the main guitar player, would you? You'd feel ripped off, wouldn't you?
You would. Although, to be fair, Marcus was the main guitar player. This guy only took 2 solos in quite a long set. So the rest of the time, he was just rhythm.
Okay.
But so in that sense, there wasn't any overstepping, and he was freely given these solos, and he didn't overextend them. They were of fixed length, so that this was it was legislated for. It wasn't a land grab or anything like that. And of course, the other thing about watching Clapton and Doyle is you're absolutely right about the dominance of the star. Yeah. But of course, the reason that Clapton and Doyle work so beautifully together is because Doyle's whole feel is so peculiar because he's playing upside down.
Yeah.
All his feel meshes with Clapton, and Clapton's feel is conventional because Clapton wrote the conventions. So his feel is conventional, but in the best possible sense. So having someone unconventional, they mesh beautifully together.
Wow.
It's the same way as Winwood and Clapton mesh so well together because Winwood's a bloody great guitar player, but he thinks like a keyboard player. Clapton thinks like a guitar player. And when they solo together, it's very similar, but the differences are what makes it so beautiful.
I'm glad you said that because that gig that they did, the Clapton Winwood gig at Madison Square Gardens, which is available on DVD or digital download, is a mandatory watch. And
I agree.
Bob has just summed it up for you folks. The guitar solos that Clapton and Winwood do together are phenomenal, and it's because of that point that Bob said that Winwood's coming across as he's not there to be a guitar hero like Clapton is. He's playing it differently. Good point, Bob.
An aside thing, again, it's a rather guitar-y thing, but when you watch the videos of them playing together, and particularly the Blind Faith song, where they both solo at the same time. So they don't swap solos. They both solo at once. And it's so interesting because if you unpick it and you replay it, you realize how much of Winwood's playing is in Clapton. And they've been playing together since 1966.
Good point.
Okay. And you realize that, we think Eric Clapton wrote the book on a particular style of guitar playing that millions of us have been preaching from ever since. What's so interesting is that you can hear there are bits of Winwood that have gone into Clapton's playing. There's Clapton's gone into Winwood. So it's almost like listening to two guitar players who are so familiar with each other, they kind of play very similar, but then you can hear and feel the subtle differences. It's very beautiful to listen to. And I'd never expected until the first time I saw them play maybe 10 years ago together. Because when I saw Blind Faith, which I did once, but obviously Winwood was playing keyboards.
Yeah.
At Hyde Park. And Clapton's playing that Telecaster custom with the Stratocaster neck. And I think it was their first gig, and it was all a bit messy, and the sound system was shit, and so on. So, I'd never seen them play together. And when I saw them play together, I'm sitting watching and realizing how much of each other is in the other one. It's beautiful. Because for me, that's one of the things about music is how you affect each other while you're playing. It's playing a cover of a song like rehearsed party piece is all very well and fine, but the real joy of stuff like music is when you get together with somebody. You just, like some people I've been playing with a long time, and frankly, I just don't really get off on it at all. Other people I've been playing with for an equally long time, and it's like every time I get together with them, it's like, oh, this is easy, and I'm now beyond any place I could take myself.
So I just have to ask this question. You saw Blind Faith at Hyde Park.
Yeah.
My Lord.
I was very young.
Yes.
It wasn't very difficult because I lived in very central London, and Hyde Park was for me about 25 minutes walk south-west.
Did you know that you were going to something important, a landmark event in rock and roll history? Did you have any idea at the time? Well,
let me think. So they supported the Rolling Stones, I think, at that gig. I think it was that gig.
Okay.
So I would have had nothing better to do as a 12-year-old on a Saturday afternoon, on a sunny Saturday afternoon in the summer, than walk over to Hyde Park and have a look-see about what these Rolling Stones lot were doing.
Okay.
That would have been in my mind as a 12-year-old. Of course, I had yes, the Rolling Stones are a big band, big pop band, kind of moving into rock and blues. Blind Faith, I probably had never even heard of. Okay. And certainly no historical significance at all. No, I just wandered down and spent a nice few hours hanging out in the park, listening to some music when I was too young to really even understand what was going on.
So it wasn't until later on, obviously, where you understood the significance of these events for you. Okay.
It's the same as I went to see the Pink Floyd in a club called UFO in Tottenham Court Road in London. Yeah. This is the original Pink Floyd. So this is the Syd Barrett Pink Floyd.
Yeah.
Again, I was 12 years old. So I mean, the idea of having any idea of what was going on, I was, everybody else is on fucking acid. It's the middle of the night. I went with a friend of mine's older brother. God knows why my parents even allowed him to take me out. And I sat there completely kind of bemused by this weirdness. It was like going to the circus, but wow. But I can recall it dimly, and I was there. Not many people saw Pink Floyd at the UFO club.
No, not at all. I've just finished reading the Guitar Player magazine that's got the article, the 50-year article on Dark Side of the Moon. Go and check it out, folks. Guitar Player do outstanding articles on tributes and celebrating landmark albums. But to go and see Syd Barrett, my gosh.
And it was all I can remember. Well, through the eyes of a 12-year-old, it was very weird. So the chances are it was very weird anyway, and it was even weirder if you were 12 years old. Or if your head was full of acid, which mine wasn't.
No. No, but it just goes to show, Bob, one of the reasons why we love this music and why we have this channel. It's celebrating, British electric blues and that whole British scene in the late 60s, in London, and how important that period of history was back then. But even now in 2023, that foundation and the influence.
Yeah. Huge influence.
It's huge.
Yeah. I mean, as a Brit, I get, sometimes I get really quite romantic about this. The idea of this little island, we're having a lot of problems with our national identity at the moment. Things are not terrific here. The infrastructure is a bit challenged. Government's a bit of a mess. But, when I get a bit depressed, I just go back and think, but for example, think about music and a few other fields of endeavor like science and art, and how much above its weight does this little island punch.
Yep.
And when I need to cheer myself up, I go and think about things like this. When I want to get depressed again, I think about infrastructure and government.
Politics and infrastructure. Yeah. Look, I get it. There, and I say this often on the channel, there's just something about those skinny English guys in the late 60s, when they heard that black blues music and how it resonated within them. And we've all heard the stories, Bob, and, you've met Eric Clapton, so you've stood by a guy that was affected to his core by Robert Johnson.
Yeah.
And Keith Richards talks about those moments as well of how he discovered himself as a person by hearing this music. And they go back and they present another version of it to the Americans. Phenomenal.
Yeah. It's I mean, I think it's one of those stories, as we go forward in time, assuming that we don't completely immolate ourselves as a race, then the history books in maybe 200 or 300 years' time, there will be a chapter about this extraordinary peculiarity where this ethnic music that started off on the African continent evolved in the southern part of the North American continent.
Yeah.
Almost went to sleep.
Yes.
Got picked up and resuscitated by a bunch of completely different people on a different continent and fed back. It's a wonderful story, to fit into the great canon of human endeavor. It's fabulous.
Yeah, and obviously the reverberations of that had an effect on Britain and her colonies. Had an effect here in Australia and New Zealand. In Canada, it's just so we were so important that the Beatles came here in the 60s in 64. We were so important.
Yeah, absolutely. It's fantastic. So I mean, that, as I say, that's when I want to remind myself about reasons to be cheerful for being, British and being in Britain. Hey,
awesome, fantastic. Hey, folks, it's been a great show hanging out with Bob. We're going to get Bob back for part 3. I'm going to timestamp, if you're watching the video, there'll be timestamps here, especially at the 1 hour mark where Bob is giving advice on open nights and mics. The 2 questions you need to ask, if it's not on the Facebook page, is, are there amplifiers? And is the backup band going to play any originals? Those are the 2 questions. Yeah. But other than that, it should be a good night, Bob.
Absolutely. And to be fair, most of them are, because most of the people who are doing it care enough and think about it enough. It's just the disappointment when you make the effort to go out to one and it's a complete road crash.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'll have Bob's social media links attached to the description here. He's got a website. He has a YouTube site, his own YouTube page, as well as one that he does with Ramon as well. So we'll attach that. Please, we ask you to go and subscribe to Bob's projects. Give him some support and let him know that the 5150 show sent you. Bob, will you come back for part 3?
That'd be an honour.
Fantastic. I'm going to give you the last word, Bob, and then we'll let you go because you've got a gig tonight.
Yeah, well, I've got a gig late tonight, quite local to where I live, but a strange pub in quite a rough neighbourhood. And we're not going on until 10:30 for our first set. 10:30 till 11:30, and then midnight to 1 o'clock. By which time I think there's going to be quite a lot of drunk people. So it's going to be a pro gig, I think, you know. But I'm looking forward to it because I'm getting more gigs now. I'm probably out nearly once a week, which is fantastic. But as a musician, you want to be playing, and
good.
I'm thrilled to be playing. And also the other thing, as a musician, you don't just want to play, nice, comfortable lounge gigs all day. You want to play diverse gigs. So you want some audiences who love you and some audiences who give you a bit of trouble. Hopefully not too much. Anyway, thank you so much for tuning in and listening.
Everybody, I'm not going to do a shout out to you, but you know that you're important to us. You know who you are in the chat. We really appreciate the support that you gave us live. It means a lot to us and what we do here on the channel. And we ask you please to go and subscribe to our friends. It's all about collaborating and helping each other. Please do that. We'll see you. I'll be back here with Rock Professor and Brad later, ranking Free's second album. Can't wait for that.
Good.
Bye-bye, everybody.
See ya.